Hey guys, how's it going? Comparing here. So today I'm going to do another review of Goblins versus Gnome cards that have been released. I think we got 8 on the chopping block today. Again, I don't want to do this too frequently, but man, they have released some interesting ones. A little bit more interesting than the ones they have already, in my opinion. And because of that, I have a few opinions about what's going on. So I think what's going on is they're trying to hype up the stuff a little bit more right before it launches, because that's kind of what you want to do. You want to give a few little teasers, and then the better cards, and the more interesting cards, and the really overpowered cards, and then you launch it so everyone really wants to play. So I think it's kind of like a marketing thing. And when Ben Brode said that, his top 5 cards haven't even been released a couple weeks ago, actually I think a couple days ago in fact, I think he really wasn't lying. I think this is exactly their design plan. And I think it's working because, well, the cards are getting better, I'm getting more hyped, and I want to play more and more every day. So, there's that, and they have released about half the cards so far in the previews and all that shit. I think we're at 59 out of 120, I believe. And I have to say that I think some cards will remain unreleased, so the hype can really, explode when the game comes out. I estimate probably, at the very least 10, 15, maybe 20 cards won't be on preview until the expansion actually gets released. Anyway, onto the cards. So first one here we got Ogre Ninja. This is a very interesting card, and it's very interesting because it follows the 50% chance to hit the wrong enemy mechanic, which also happens to be on another card that was previously released. That was, I believe, a warrior weapon. This card, the Ogre Ninja, is a rogue card. It's 5 for a 6/6 stealth with 50% chance to attack the wrong enemy. And this is kind of a card that's fairly debated. I think it's pretty good. In Constructed, it might work. It's kind of hard to really estimate in Constructed because in Constructed, you design a deck and synergy is taken into account, and because so much will change, it's kind of difficult to know if how this card will fit into the meta game will be possible once so much has already changed. So this card is really good because, well, it's a shitload of stats for 5 and it has stealth, so your opponent can't remove it until it attacks at least once, usually is the case. And it kind of works with Rogue because Rogue has a fairly easy time dealing with a lot of small minions. And if you leave a lot of really small minions, in the graveyard and you leave the big ones on the board, well, this one can be pretty good. Let's say if he's got like a 5/5 tiger or something like that, and if it's stealth, you can attack face. It can do 6 face, or it can kill a stealth target. Also, what it can do if you're really desperate, it's kind of like the Ragnaros type of card where you can go for a YOLO chance to win. For instance, if your opponent has like a taunt wall, you can combo and eviscerate to face and hope for the best when you attack a taunt. This creature can theoretically attack the wrong enemy in the right way by bypassing taunt and hitting face. So it has a few interesting mechanics, so I think in Constructed it might work, but it's really hard to gauge. I do think in Arena is a very good card. It's comparable to Venture Co. Mercenary, which is a very good card in Arena. The downsides of Venture Co. is that 1, it gets frozen a lot, and 2, it gets hit with peacekeeping effects. So like Humiliator, Elder, Peacekeeper, and Paladin. That makes it really terrible against specific classes. However, with this card, it doesn't really have those weaknesses. The weakness is not really as big, and the stats are pretty much the same. Like the Venture Co. Mercenary, it's 5 for a 7/6, but you don't really use that 7th point of attack, really. I mean, just about never does it actually matter. The 6 health is important, and I think 5, maybe 6 attack is important. And this card kind of fits that role perfectly. The stats are very good. And it has a function in Arena. Like in Arena, players play a game where they don't want to lose more than 1 card for 1 card. You have to consider value because you're not going to combo and win the game spontaneously just because you hit like 9 mana, for instance. So it's going to be the type of card that has some kind of potential to deny the cards that your opponent is going to play. So for instance, if it's turn 5, both players have an empty board, or if he has some garbage that you remove with Backstab, which is frequently the case when you're playing Rogue, or your weapon, let's say, you play Ogre Ninja, and that actually stops him in its tracks because there's no card for this amount of mana that really challenges it. So what happens is, if your opponent is sitting on like a Yeti or something like that, instead of playing the Yeti, he's probably going to play nothing. So that makes the Rogue very comfortable. You can often get a sprint. You can pretty much just dominate the board from that sense. And because of that, because it is a Rogue card, because it is so threatening, even though it may not actually work, when you're using this card, you'd be like, oh, maybe it'll hit, maybe it won't. That kind of sucks. But when you're facing this card, you got to think of it that way. You don't want to play a Yeti into it. You don't want to play a Stranglethorn Tiger into it. So what happens is you're going to play nothing, you're going to get tempoed out, and you're going to get smashed. So this card is actually very strong in Arena, even though there is that random factor. Though I feel that doesn't really take too much away from it. Also, in Arena, Survive Flame Strike, it's stealth. That's pretty sick by itself. So, on to the next card. We got Dunmal Shaman. It's a Shaman card. And it has a similar thing with 50% chance to attack the wrong enemy. Now, some people said this card's pretty good because, yeah, if it's against an empty board, you can do a shitload of damage, just 4 mana. But I'd argue that's not very good. One, because if you're playing against like a mage, it dies to a 2-drop plus ping. It's really only good in the situation where the shaman is dominating the board, you kill something with spells, and you can just attack freely. Because it has 4 health, and because for the Wind Fury to actually really work, you kind of need to have a clear board in your opponent's state. Yes, the card is good in terms of value, 4 for a 5/4. Overload 1's not too big of a deal because you can follow up with another 4-drop. Shamans don't really have many 4-drops to begin with, so it kind of fits the mana curve very well. It kind of works with a few of the cards like Rockbite or that kind of stuff, but I just think it's going to be fairly infrequent to pull it off. And I think specifically in Arena, Shaman rares are ridiculous, so more than likely there's going to be a better option, and I think this card in the rare slot specifically for Arena is far below average. As far as Constructed goes, well, I think a lot of people are going to play really sticky minions still. I think that's kind of the name of the game in terms of the Zoo, and I don't think Zoo's going away, and if Zoo's not going away, this card's kind of crap, so I don't think it's really that good, but who knows? If Shaman removal kind of takes the cake and can dominate the board fairly easily, maybe it'll work. But as it stands, from my opinion, it's kind of like a win more card in a class that if you're already winning, you pretty much stay already winning anyway. So I'm not too big of a fan of this one. Then we have the rogue card Sabotage. I think Sabotage is possibly one of the best cards released so far. It's 4 mana to destroy a random enemy minion, so it's like Deadly Shot for 1 more mana, but the combo effect is also to destroy your opponent's weapon. So people compare this to Deadly Shot, but it's not really a valid comparison because Hunter has so many ways to remove creatures. One with Freeze Trap, just Hunter's Mark, and like Unleash combo. You know, there's a lot of crap like that. And Rogue has a lot of removal for small creatures, but as far as big creatures are considered, they don't really have much. And because of that, when you look at Arena, for instance, most rogues that don't have Assassinate can't actually get past, 8 or 9 wins because they can't deal with big minions. It's so inefficient to trade for it, and this card fits that part perfectly. Also, because it's an epic card, yes, you won't see it very frequently in Arena, but when you do, it'll probably be the best one because most epics in the game are garbage, and Rogue is no exception. Preparation, anyone? Yeah. Sabotage is ridiculous considering all of those things. So, it's also a note to mention that it doesn't do the effects one at a time, it doesn't simultaneously, so killing a card like Tyrion will not kill the Ashbringer, but what the card also does, and it's very notable, is that in Arena, the worst matchup for Rogue is a Warrior, and that's because the Warrior can usually, when they have slight board control, play a weapon, dominate board control, and still have that creature. And it fits that slot perfectly. And in that specific situation, you can play like a small creature like a 2-drop, which Rogues often have because that's what you need to make a good deck, because that's what you need to combo your other cards. So you play that, you play Sabotage, you kill the weapon, you kill the creature, and you're in a ridiculously good position. So you can kind of use it as an Assassinate when you need to because you have very efficient removal for the small creatures. It helps against Warrior, it's an epic card, it's a really good card, it's a very good value in terms of mana, and I think because of all those factors, it's actually going to be very significant and Constructed as well. The only situation where it won't be is if pretty much everyone's playing some kind of Death Rattle Zoo or Mech Zoo or that kind of crap, and it's just, to destroy a random minion for 4 just is, very, very inefficient. And that might be the case, so again, it's very hard to gauge in Constructed. The next card up is Fellheart. It's 5 to deal 5 damage to a minion if it's a friendly demon, gain +5/+5 instead. So it's basically Demon Fire, but it's a very, very big version of it. And because it's so significant, I think it's actually reasonable to compare it to Blessing of Kings. Blessing of Kings is really good because the 4 health is very significant because it pretty much lets any garbage minion played in the early game kill pretty much any minion played in the mid to late game and survive to kill another minion. So in terms of Arena, this card works very frequently like Kings, plus you have the option to deal 5 damage to an enemy minion, and I think you can probably draft enough demons for it to actually function, for it to actually work. And because of that, I think this card is very solid in Arena, and again, it's an epic card. Epics in Arena are pretty garbage. So there's that. In Constructed, it seems pretty bad, because if you're playing Warlock, right now the Warlock is very divided. You have the very slow deck, and you have the very fast deck. And this doesn't really work with either. So because of that, I think in Constructed, unless things change, it won't be used pretty much at all. But one more thing to note is that this card has some pretty sick art. Now, I don't really care about this stuff, but man, this is exceptional. This is like a Druid of the Claw that got like demonly possessed, and he's got like the Illidan horns, and I don't know. It's just super cool. I want a painting of this. Anyway, next card up. Scarlet Purifier. This card is out of a set of 3 cards that were released at the same time that deal with death rattles. This is a Paladin card. It's 3 for a 4/3, and it's very important to note that specifically for a Paladin, the 4 attack and the 3 health is not that good. If it was 3 attack and 4 health, or even 2 and 5, it'd be much, much better, because on turn 4, often you are playing True Silver Champion, or some other variation of the card, like Kings, that kind of stuff, at the very least in Arena. And constructed, what's a Paladin, right? So this card is supposed to deal with death rattles, but because it deals 2 damage to all minions with death rattle, you can kind of combo your own death rattle minions. So you can basically play this if there's a lot of decks playing death rattle to kill their minions. Kind of. I mean, it doesn't work very well against eggs, but because of that, you can basically use it with eggs on your own side. So Paladin has a lot of buffs. You can put eggs in there anyway, and this is just another activator and another counter to death rattle, and the stats aren't the worst. So in Constructed, if Paladin somehow makes some deck competitive, this card may be used. I don't know. It's kind of an outside theory. As far as Arena, the stats are pretty solid. The ability is pretty solid. In Arena, you usually just pick random minions. A lot of them just happen to have death rattle, dealing 2 damage to them, and being able to control when you play it makes this card fairly good. Certainly doesn't compete with a lot of other rares like, well, Alder Peacekeeper, which is by far the best, and probably a lot of neutral rares, in fact. But as it stands, I think it's pretty cool. I was just hoping that the stats were at the very least reversed to be a 3/4, and then actually maybe really help Paladin. Next card up is another one dealing with death rattle minions. It's a neutral taunt minion. So as a base, it's basically a crappy Tarn Warrior. And Tarn Warrior is pretty crappy already. So if you're not playing against a death rattle guy, if death rattle is not a thing Constructed, this card sucks. But if it is, if death rattle is pretty common, if everyone's playing Loot Hoarder or some other variation of some death rattle card, well, it's pretty good. If your enemy just has 1 death rattle minion, it's 3 for a 3/4 taunt, which is pretty good. And most death rattle minions actually have a high amount of health and a low amount of attack. So buffing it to 4 health, even just once, will often give you some decent stopping power, some decent value. In Arena, I think this card kind of sucks. It's optimistic to think that you'll actually be able to play it against a death rattle minion, and when you do, it's not that significant. I kind of compare this card in my mind to Blood Knight, where you usually hold on to it until you're desperate just to play a minion. So Blood Knight is really good, but when it's really good, it wins you the game because it's like a turn 3 6/6. But when it's not really good, it's like a turn 7, I ran out of cards, I'm playing a 3/3 for 3. Now this card, when you play it on turn 3, it's not as much of a win, and later in the game, when you play it as a 2/3 taunt because you have nothing else in your hand, it's much crappier than Blood Knight. So I think this card is pretty bad in Arena, and things have to get pretty specific and Constructed for it to really work. Though, they might, because our next card, Feign Death. Trigger all death rattles on your minions. It's a hunter card, it's 2 mana. Some people have really complained about this card because it seems really, 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 really ridiculous, and, well, maybe it is, but it's kind of hard to gauge right now because it's kind of hard to see how the death rattle zoo meta will really compete with the mech zoo meta, because it seems that these kind of things will conflict. I don't know if you could actually run both, and I think one might be superior to the other, and, well, it might be pretty good. If you think of it in the hunter decks these days, which I think is the fairest comparison, it's pretty good. Even if you only have 1 death rattle trigger, it's not going to be a dead card, and that deck cannot afford dead cards, so it kind of fits. Like if you have a high main, 2 mana, 2 2/2s. You can put an egg in that deck now because 2 mana, 4/4. So it kind of works. With Mad Scientist, it's alright. 2 mana, play a random secret from your deck. It's kind of like a cycle card. So you can usually make it work. It's not often going to be a dead card, so because of that, I can see it being run in some kind of death rattle zoo hunter deck, which we're already seeing a lot on ladder, so that people really hate that because, well, it's a good deck that's really frustrating to play against being made better. But I don't think that's appropriate. I think it's too quick to judge, so things might change, and it really might not be too big of a deal. In Arena, this card is garbage. The next card, the last one, we got Crackle. 2 mana for a 3/6 Overload 1. So it's kind of like a super lightning bolt, but closer really to Lava Burst. And I think this card actually destroys Lava Burst, because Lava Burst is 3 mana for 5 with Overload 2. Crackle's 2 mana for an average damage of 4 to 5 with Overload 1. But the way Shaman works is you usually have some kind of garbage on board, like a totem, maybe like a 2/2 creature, maybe you have an axe in hand. And often when you play these kind of cards, you can kind of make up for the randomness. That's why Lightning Storm kind of works. And if you're going for like face, you can save up Crackles, maybe you're playing Lightning Bolts as well, to go for like a face rush, specifically when you get a spell damage totem. And because of that, you can kind of overcome this randomness. So some people think the randomness is pretty bad. I think the randomness is pretty good. I think this card is pretty damn solid. I think people will run it in Constructed because even though there is some kind of randomness, I feel you can go face with it. It kind of works with a lot of the other Shaman cards. There's like the Ancestral Call where you put a random minion from each player's hand to the battlefield. Just having more spells in general has some kind of synergy that I've seen that maybe other people haven't really noticed. So I think this card has huge potential. It's going to be great in Arena, and in Constructed, it may be, you know, the card that the Shaman deck needs to really go off in some crazy combos. So overall, the cards are awesome. I'm really excited to try to play with them. And, well, I think big things are coming. I think the coolest cards are yet to be released, and I will cover them as soon as I can. Anyway, guys, until then, I'll see you guys tomorrow.